Shalom to everyone. Continuing our series, Mysteries of Creation, in the bigger series of Fundamentals of Kabbalah and Chassidut. So when I was preparing this class, I had a flash of something that I probably should have said right at the beginning of the first class. But it's never too late. And that is simply, why is it important to study the mysteries of creation? In retrospect, that would have been the most obvious place to start. We started right at Bereshit. So I want to fill that in now, because I think it's very, very important. Baruch Hashem, we've been learning incredible things, the deeper dimensions of the Torah and God's creative process. But again, the question is, so why is it important to us? And the reason is that we are created in the image of God. A human being is a unique creature in all of creation. And we share with the Creator a creative urge that has the ability to what's called create worlds. In fact, it says in the Talmud that a righteous person, a tzaddik, if they wanted to, could create an entire world. But the truth is, we create our own world. We create the world that we live in. And especially this last approximately 200 years, the whole planet and consciousness and humanity and our lifestyle has changed so dramatically. And really, we're only scratching the surface of our potential. I believe biologists say that we use a very small part of our brain power. If we can imagine something like 5%, 7%, what happens if we were using 100%? We can imagine, especially today with all of the really radical and constant changes. So learning about creation should inspire us to create. It could be in the artistic realm. It could be in the spiritual realm. It could be in the professional realm. But the idea is that the dynamics of creation, of learning about, here we're learning about the 7 days of creation. And really, we've really focused on the first day of creation. We haven't even really totally expanded to all 7. And especially the last 2 weeks, and we're going to continue today with just the first word of the Torah. But in that kind of learning is keys, is our dynamics, is inspiration for our own ability to create. So I felt that was important to state, that we're not just going through an intellectual exercise here. In a certain way, we could say this is Torah Lishma. We're learning it because we just want to know the depths of the Torah. But what I'm trying to say is that it is very translatable. And it just happened today, I had a discussion with a friend, and he was learning a Kabbalistic book and was looking for the practical applications. So I gave just two examples of the way I see it, and this is something we've discussed before. But here, especially when you're learning the Kabbalah, the Arizal, where the symbolism is so deep. But we've discussed many times the idea of Shvirat HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels. In the previous world of Tohu, when the lights were too great for the initial vessels of creation, they shattered, and that opened the way for this world, the world that we live in now, called Olam HaTikun. And so I mentioned this before, is that what sounds like a cosmological, Kabbalistic concept called the breaking of the vessels is in our daily lives. And I've said this before, that the expressions that we say based on our experiences. I can't handle this. I need some space. I'm freaking out. Get me out of here. What's going to be? And other expressions like this. I'm at the breaking point. All of these are very, very real expressions of the energy of Shvirat HaKelim, meaning at that moment, there's too much energy, too much light, too much stimuli for me to handle right now. That is Shvirat HaKelim. And the other example we talked about was the Tzimtzum, the contraction of God's infinite being in order to make space for the world. So how do we understand that on a practical level? Well, the idea of Tzimtzum, contraction, is the secret of focus, especially in today's world, the kind of 24/7 world we live in. Baruch Hashem, we have Shabbat, and it's more of a 24/6 world. But for most of the world out there, it's a 24/7 world with constant flow of stimuli, almost a bombardment of stimuli. And so people have a hard time concentrating. People have a hard time focusing. Anyone who has to deal with the media knows that that's one way that Facebook and all the other ones, TikTok and Instagram and Twitter, it has to be like people's attention span is like so short. It has to be like, the video has to be like a minute and a half at the most. Twitter is up to 170 characters. The idea is there has to be focus. And focus is a tremendous thing, though. Without focus, we're here, we're there, we're everywhere, and we're nowhere. So that's the Tzimtzum in our very lives. So I wanted to mention all of this, better late than never, that when we're learning different concepts here, the key is always, well, how can we translate that into our daily life? What does that mean to us? Having said that, we are now going to continue with just a few more permutations of the word Bereshit that we didn't get to last week. Obviously, for those who didn't see it, you can always do our WhatsApp, our YouTube, our website. You can always watch the past videos. But we went through a series of permutations based on the Sefer of Tikkunei Zohar, the book that has 70 chapters based on the permutations of the 6 letters of Bereshit. So a couple that we didn't get to that I wanted to is, and again, if anyone has a pen and paper, you could write out the letters of Bereshit, which are Bet, Resh, Aleph, Shin, Yud, Tav. And this permutation from Tikkunei Zohar is Bara Shtei. He created 2. Now, this is something we talked about before, but we didn't actually see it embedded in the word Bereshit, because the first letter of the Torah is a Bet. And this symbolizes to us the dualistic, bipolar world that we live in, of opposites, of equal and opposite energies. And that is the basis of our world of creation and our experience of life itself. Constant dichotomies, opposites, dualities. And so here in the word Bereshit, not just the first letter is Bet, which represents this idea, but is the actual letters Bara Shtei. He created 2. And we could speak for a long time about all the dualities, but that's not my purpose here. It's just to show that in the word Bereshit is this concept of a dualistic world we live in. For those who remember, we emphasize this, what I'll call a formula called 1 becomes 2 in order to become 1. That God, who is 1, creates a world which now there is a something that appears to be other than God. That is the main duality of existence, is there's God and there's the apparent reality of something other. Each one of us has a individual world. That's why the Talmud says that each person is a world to themselves. And it also says that someone, God forbid, kills someone, it's as if they've killed a whole world. And yet we know that the purpose of, especially of Judaism, of Torah, is to see the oneness that pervades the dualistic appearance of this world. 1 becomes 2 in order to become 1. So if we're talking about practicalities, this is one of the main foundations on which we should base our consciousness, is to be always aware of the opposites. Opposites are very, very important, and to understand the interplay, the interchange between opposite energies, but never to lose track of the ultimate oneness that is behind all creation. The next permutation is Be Aleph Tishrei. If you look at the 6 letters of Bereshit, it's Be, on or in, Aleph, which is also means 1 of the month of Tishrei. When is Rosh Hashanah? Be Aleph Tishrei. And in the prayers of Rosh Hashanah, we say, this is the birthday of the world. So we know that there are 4 New Years in Jewish tradition, and Rosh Hashanah is the New Year of years. Now, this is an interesting thing because we know from tradition that Aleph Tishrei is actually the 6th day of creation. according to tradition, creation begins on the 25th of Elul, and Rosh Hashanah is already the 6th day. But here, there's a combination here. Ba'alef Tishrei, and last week we learned the permutation of Bereshit is bara sheet. He created 6. So you put these together, as on the 6th day is really the first of Tishrei, because on the 6th day, human beings were created. Human beings are the purpose of creation. And so therefore, there's really a combination here. God created 6, which we could say God created on the 6th day, really the purpose of creation. And so Ba'alef Tishrei, that is, in a sense, that's when we celebrate Rosh Hashanah. We could ask, why don't we celebrate Rosh Hashanah and Chaf Hei Elul, if that is the beginning of creation? Because the creation is for a purpose. And so we emphasize the purpose of creation, Ba'alef Tishrei, more than just the physical foundation on which the purpose is built. Now, the next one we're going to spend a little bit of time on, because it's really a fascinating one. And that is, in the letters of Bereshit are the names of 2 months, Av, Tishrei. The month of Av, which is the 5th month, and Tishrei, which is the 7th month. So the truth is, I created an entire class on the connection between Av and Tishrei. I've given it over a number of times. It's very, very fascinating, but that is not our purpose tonight. But I do want to bring a couple of amazing connections between Av and Tishrei that have to do with creation, that have to do with birth. Because when we say that Rosh Hashanah is the birthday of creation, so Tishrei is like a birth. So what's some of the connections? So first of all, the letter of the month of Av is Tet. And Tet equals 9. And 9 is always associated with the months of pregnancy. And the most important day, or one of the 2 most important days of the month of Av, of course, is the 9th of Av. So here you have the number 9 in the fast day of Tisha B'Av, and in the letter of the month, according to Sefer Yetzirah, which we're actually going to begin to discuss very shortly. So what's the connection with Tishrei, Av Tishrei? So on Be'alef Tishrei, we blow the shofar. And we've discussed this before. Many of you have been part of perhaps one of the classes where we discuss this, is that the secret of shofar is the number 9. Because all the sounds of the shofar are based on 9 sounds. The trua, it has to be a minimum of 9 blasts. It can be more, but it must be a minimum of 9. The shvarim, which is 3 sounds, each one of them has to be held for 3 beats minimum. Could be more, has to be 3. So 3 times 3 equals 9. And the tekiah has to be at least not, it's only 1 sound, but it has to be held for at least 9 beats. So all three are based on nines. And then when we blow the shofar, we blow them in three series of threes. Tekiah, Shvarim, Trua, Tekiah. Tekiah, Shvarim, Trua, Tekiah. Tekiah, Shvarim, Trua, Tekiah. And then Tekiah, Shvarim, Tekiah. Tekiah, Shvarim, Tekiah. Tekiah, Shvarim, Tekiah. All nines. 3 times 3, 9. And when you look in a Machzor, the special prayer book for the holidays, you can actually see it very clearly. You can see the series of nines. So 9 is about birth. And so in Chassidus, it's given over that the month of Av is the pregnancy of the new year that only is revealed in Tishrei. The month of Av is like a woman in her 9 months of pregnancy and gives birth during Tishrei. And we also, of course, have the tradition that on the 9th of Av, Mashiach is born. So this is also a symbolism that after 9 days of Av, the breaking of the waters is happening on Tisha B'Av, the breaking of the temple, the breaking of the waters, and Mashiach is born. The energy of Mashiach is born. So here is a beautiful connection that the year, which begins in Tishrei, is the revelation of the pregnancy of Av. Now, another connection is from the 17th of Tammuz, which is a fast day, through Tisha B'Av is 22 days. And from Rosh Hashanah through Simchas Torah is 22 days. There are two 22-day periods in the year, the only 22-day periods that we have. So obviously there's a deep connection. So the Slonim Rebbe, we've learned this before, many of you with me, is the Slonim Rebbe said that it's like drawing a picture, that when someone wants to draw a picture, first they draw the outline, and then they fill it in. So in the Tivat Shalom, he says that the 22 days, called the 3 weeks, this is like drawing the outline of the new year. And then when it comes to Tishrei, those 22 days is how we fill in the year. So this is all alluded to in this permutation of Bereshit being Av Tishrei. So this is just a deep insight into like the birthing process. And the important thing here is that I mentioned the idea of the breaking of the waters. And so we have this concept that most of you have heard, that there's nothing as whole as a broken heart. And so in Tishrei, we're trying to achieve a whole heart. But as the Slonim Rebbe was saying, well, how do we do it? First, we have to, in a sense, we have to break our heart. That's the tshuva process of Elul. But it begins in Av. And it's almost like the new year will be as rich as the breaking that we feel during the 22 days of the 3 weeks. So these are some deep connections, but I want to make two more connections here. There are many, many more, a whole class full. And that is the connection between Tu B'Av and Rosh Hashanah. Tu B'Av is the 15th of Av, It's only 6 days after Tisha B'Av, and according to the Mishnah, it's one of the most joyous days of the year. Now, what is the other? It says actually one of the two most joyous days is Tu B'Av and Yom Kippur. Here's another connection of the permutation of Bereshit being Av Tishrei. So Tu B'Av is 45 days before Rosh Hashanah. So what is the significance of that? So the word for thought is machshava. And the word machshava is based on choshev ma. Choshev ma. The same letters of machshava. Choshev ma means to think of whatness, essence. The word in Hebrew for essence is mahut, from the word ma. We think of ma as like a question. And this works very well because we're told the better the question, hopefully the better the answer. Now, how do you get to the essence of anything? Through questioning, through probing, through investigating, through thinking, through meditating. So choshev ma. So in the Gemara, there's a fascinating discussion as to when was the world created. Now, we would just assume, what's the question? Ba'alav Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah. That's when the world is created. We even say it in our prayers. But there's actually a discussion, is it the first of Tishrei or the first of Nisan, which is exactly 6 months across on a 360-degree calendar of time, is exactly across. There's this whole discussion in Masechet Rosh Hashanah. All these different proofs are brought, and it's left somewhat not clear. That's why two of the New Years we have in the years. One is the first of Tishrei, which is Rosh Hashanah, the New Year of years. But the first of Nisan is the New Year of months. The first of the months. Tishrei is the 7th of the month. So we already have a question. How can it be the new year if it's the 7th of the month? So this has to do with the whole calendar of unifying and balancing a lunar calendar and a solar calendar. But the point here is, so when was the world created? So many years later, Rabbeinu Tam, who is one of the Tosfot, about 8 to 1,000 years ago. So he comments and he kind of nails it. He said that on Rosh Hashanah, the world is created in thought and in Nisan in actuality. So now we have the beautiful connection. If Bereshit is a combination of Av Tishrei, 45 days before creation is Tu B'Av. So the idea is that on Tu B'Av, the thought of creation arose in God's mind. Now we're talking very symbolic here. But there's a deep truth here. And that's what is hinted at this permutation of Av Tishrei, that 45 days before creation, in thought, Choshev Ma. Oh, I didn't say. Choshev Ma equals 45. So if you look at the word choshev machshava, it means he thought of 45. That 45 days before creation, as it were, the thought arose in God's mind to create the world. Now, connected to this is another amazing thing. We already mentioned that creation really begins on Chaf He Elul. Chaf He Elul is 40 days after Tu B'Av. What happens on Tu B'Av? So there we have this tradition. It's in the Mishnah that the young ladies would go out to the vineyards. Everyone would be dressed in borrowed white garments, so no one really could tell who's rich and who's poor. And they would dance in the vineyards, and the men would come, single men, and shidduchim would be made. Love was in the air. Love was in the air. So 40 days before the creation on Chaf He Elul is Tu B'Av. What is that telling us? So we have a tradition that 40 days before the creation of the embryo, a voice goes out in heaven and says, this child that will be born from this embryo is destined for that child. In other words, soulmates. So if you're following on Tu B'Av, God is calling out, my soulmate is Am Yisrael. 40 days before creation on Tu B'Av, when soulmates are made, shidduchim are made, when the thought, remember we've learned this, that when the thought arose to create the world, the thought of Israel arose first. So if you put this all together, this is just an amazing thought process that we just went through. That on Tu B'Av, there's like a voice goes out from heaven, but it's God making a shidduch with Israel. Because God is thinking already 5 days before of creating the world. So these are some of the very, very deep connections between Av, Tishrei. But again, we started the evening, we could say, well, what do we learn from this? Well, on a very practical level there's a way of serving God from fear or awe, and there's a way of serving God from love. So if we have this idea that we're soulmates with God, that should inspire us in how we think about our relationship with God, how it makes us think about serving God, about doing the mitzvot, about learning Torah, because the basis of it is this incredible love story. So that is a very spiritual thing, but it can and should be translated into how we relate to God. Having said that, we'll end with this section. Another very important permutation of Bereshit is Yira Boshet, which is the fear of embarrassment. Now, I just mentioned love, and yet in the word Bereshit is the word Yira. Now, the word Boshet, by the way, so Yira is Yud Resh Aleph, Bet Shin Tav. But if you take the letters of Boshet, it's Shabbat. And this we learned already. Last week we learned that one of the permutations is Yira Shabbat, the awe of Shabbat. In the Zohar, it says that love and fear, but it's always better, in a sense, to translate awe. Love and awe are like two wings of a bird. The bird is the neshama, is the soul. And the soul can only fly if it has both wings, has both love and yira. And here it's understood throughout Chassidut that when we talk about the fear of God, what it means, there is a place for fear in the sense of, especially when we do something wrong and we realize we did something wrong and we realize that there's consequences for what we've done wrong. Well, Baruch Hashem, there's tshuva, but there's a healthy component to understanding mida keneged mida, a measure for a measure. It's a healthy kind of realization. But the yira that we're taught in Chassidut and Kabbalah is that when we love someone, we have a fear of doing something that will separate us from our beloved or will hurt our beloved. That's the kind of awe we're talking about, the kind of yira. That's why the word fear, it's just better to use the word yira because fear has too many negative connotations. So here we see in the word Bereshit this idea of yira. And so we know also is Reshit Chachma Yirat Hashem. Of the word Bereshit, 5 of the letters is just the word Reshit, means the beginning. So Reshit Chachma, the beginning of wisdom, is the awe of God. And what it means is that we shouldn't take a relationship with God casually. Just like we shouldn't take a relationship with parents casually. We could be buddy-buddy with our parents. We could be buddy-buddy with our kids. But there's a certain place where a parent has to remain the parent and the children have to remain the children. And there has to be a clear understanding of that relationship. Like I say, buddy-buddy is really works a lot of the time. But there has to be a healthy awe in the relationship. Okay, so we've gone through many of the permutations of Bereshit. And now we are going to start a new thing. And we're only going to get through just a little here. Is I want to introduce here the Sefer Yetzirah. In English, the Book of Formation. We are not in any way, shape, or form going to go through the whole book. That would take, it took us a whole year to get through 70 faces. It would take us a whole year to get through Sefer Yetzirah if we did it properly. That's not the point here, but I do want to bring what I'll call is an overview and key points from Sefer Yetzirah in relationship to the mysteries of creation. The Sefer Yetzirah is considered perhaps the oldest of all Kabbalistic texts. And according to tradition, the wisdom of Sefer Yetzirah goes back to Avram Avinu. And we know that because the very last Mishnah in the book mentions Avram Avinu as the inspiration of the book of Sefer Yetzirah. Now, this is not to claim that Avram Avinu composed Sefer Yetzirah in the form that we have it. No one claims that. But we have an oral tradition. Much of the world, much of the Western world doesn't understand the realities of an oral tradition over thousands of years. Many tribal people understand. They have oral traditions that were handed down from generation to generation and truly oral. Judaism has a very ancient oral tradition. And so the oral tradition is that the mysteries of Sefer Yetzirah, which are the mysteries of creation, go back to Avram Avinu. The Talmud itself has the tradition that Avram, in his own generation, was considered by the world as the spiritual figure in the world, the mystic, the expert on astronomy and astrology. He was called by the people of Canaan a prince of God. And the Talmud says that the kings of the world would just like later it says in the book of Kings that wise people from all over the world came to Jerusalem to learn at the feet of Shlomo HaMelech, of King Solomon. But this was also true of Avram. So the wisdom goes back all the way. I heard from Rav Ginsburg that most likely it was Rebbe Akiva who edited the basic versions. There are actually a number of different versions of Sefer Yetzirah. That it was Rebbe Akiva that, in a sense, put his stamp on the basic version that we have today. So that is approximately 1,800 years after Avram Avinu. So what we're going to do today, first I'm going to give a 5-minute overview of Sefer Yetzirah and why we're learning it, because the mysteries of creation, in a sense, boil down to, well, what are the building blocks of creation? In other words, if we understand from a Jewish point of view, especially a mystical point of view, but it's not even mystical, as we'll see in a second, it's from Pirkei Avot, that the building blocks of creation are the Hebrew letters and the 10 Sfirot. Many of you were with us when we did the series on the Sfirot. And here we're going to see in just a few minutes the opening Mishnah of Sefer Yetzirah, which that's how it opens. But Sefer Yetzirah is 6 chapters, and the first 2 concentrate on the 10 Sfirot, and the remaining chapters are based on the letters. And as we've mentioned in the past, if you would ask a scientist, what are the building blocks of creation? So they would answer rightfully, atoms, particles, elements, and they would be 100% correct. If you ask not even just in Jewish mysticism, just Jewish tradition, what are the building blocks of creation? The answer would be the letters and the sfirot. So the obvious question is, like, are these two different worlds we're talking about? Absolutely not. Both are talking about the exact same thing. In other words, our atoms and particles and cells and elements are the letters and the sfirot. We're talking about the same thing. So this week, we only have time to just introduce. And then, I'm not sure if it'll take a week or 2 weeks, we're going to do an overview of the building blocks of creation. And why I say it's not just a mystical idea, because in Pirkei Avot, it says specifically with 10 expressions of speech, God created the world. This idea that I think everyone has heard, what are called the 10 Mamarot. And this is where in the story of creation, it says, Vayomer Elokim Yehi blank. And God said, let there be. And so that appears actually 9 times. And the 10th is considered, the opening verse of the Torah, Bereshit, is considered an expression in of itself, almost a qualitatively unique expression. But here, if we just read in Hebrew and English, it says over and over, and God said, let there be, and there was. And so the instruments of speech are the letters. And that's why when we look at the 7 days of creation, and we look at the word like we did Bereshit, and for those who were here last week and this week, in a certain way, when you look at the word Bereshit, it begins to answer the who, when, where, how, and why of creation. It's in the letters themselves. And this is the secret of all learning Torah, is that the secrets of the Torah and even the simple understanding, again, for those who were with us for a whole year when we went through 70 faces, everything is based on the letters and the words. All understanding from the simple, the pshat, the remez, the drush, and the sod, all of it, including the pshat, is based on the letters that make up a word, the meaning of the words in the verse, their context, their connections, and what they mean. That's from the simple to the most mystical. So that's why Sefer Yetzirah is such an important book, because it's the first book that dealt with the Sfirot and the letters. Sefer Yetzirah is quoted in the Zohar. Sefer Yetzirah precedes the Zohar. And that's why it's such a basic idea. And so we're going to learn really just an overview of Sefer Yetzirah, but we should keep in mind that by understanding the letters and their structure, we begin to understand the structure of the world. So let's read the first opening Mishnah of Sefer Yetzirah. And it says like this, B'shloshim v'shtayim netivot pliyot chachma. And I'm going to go back and explain these concepts. With 32 wondrous pathways of wisdom, chakak, and then it has 2 names of God, Yud and Hey, and then Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. Chakak means carved out or engraved. These 2 names of God, Tsevaot, of the hosts, Elokei Yisrael, the God of Israel, Elokim Chayim, the living God, Umelech Olam, and the King of the world. Another name of God, Kel Shakai, another name of God, the Almighty, Rachum v'Chanun, the compassionate and gracious, Ram v'Nisa, elevated and high, Shochen Ad, who dwells forever, the Kadosh Shemo, whose name is holy, Marom v'Kadosh, an elevated type, an elevated God who is holy, who Kadosh who ubara et olamo, and he created his world b'shlosha sfarim, with 3 books, b'sefer, b'svar, b'sipur, with text, with number, and with story. That is the opening of Sefer Yetzirah. So let's go back now and try to understand a little bit. So first of all, this is what we already said. With 32 wondrous pathways of wisdom, these are the 10 sfirot and the 22 letters. So here, I'm showing you 2 different charts showing really, this is what Sefer Yetzirah is saying. Here we see the 10 sfirot. Here dot is kind of like faded here because it's like the 11th. When you count Keter, we usually don't count dot. Or you count dot, you don't count Keter. Nonetheless, these are the sfirot, and you see the lines between them. There are 22 connecting lines. These are the letters. These are the 32 wondrous pathways of wisdom with which God created the world. That's the opening statement. These are the building blocks of creation. And it says right away, they're pliot, they're wondrous. So this is connected very much to, because our host is Galei Nai, Rav Ginsburg's organization, which is based on a verse. Galei Nai ve'abita niflaot mitoratecha. Open my eyes that I should see wonders in your Torah. So that word wonders is the same word here. Pliot is niflaot. And in fact, some of you might get online every week. Rav Ginsburg puts out or his students put out in Hebrew and English. One in the English, it's called wonders. And in Hebrew, it's called niflaot. And these are delivered every Thursday and Friday. And they're spread all over Israel now. And you can get them online also. So let's continue. I want to get through at least this first one, and then that's what we'll pick up next week. So here we have the first 2 are 2 names of God. You have the 4-letter name of God, preceded by the 2-letter name of God, a Yud and a Hey. And according to tradition, God created this world with the letter Hey, and the world to come with the letter Yud. So that's a little bit why it's here with Yud K, Vav K. And actually there's a verse that says with these 2 names of God, Yud K, Vav K, Sur Olamim. Sur could be translated as the rock of the world. meaning God is the foundation of the world. But you can also read it that the name Yud-Ke Vav-Ke used the two letters, the Yud and the He. Tsur is Yitzirah, to form. So God used these two letters to form this world and the world to come. Now, another, to me, very important thing here, it says, Umelech Olam, and King of the world. So there's a question. Every day we say 100 blessings. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam. And then 100 different versions of whatever the blessing is. So the question is, where did that phrase come from? Well, you don't find it anywhere in its complete form in verses in the Torah. But what you do have in the book of Chronicles, and it's in our daily prayers, where it says, Vayevorech David. David came and he blessed God. And he said, Baruch atah Hashem Elokei Yisrael. So he got the first 4 words in there. Baruch atah Hashem. Instead of Elokeinu, he said Elokei Yisrael. But here we see in this ancient text the Melech Olam, the king, the idea of God being the king of the world. And this is probably the oldest tradition of referring to God as the king of the world. So here we could see from David, you have Baruch atah Hashem and the basis of Elokeinu. And here we have Melech Olam. We say it Melech HaOlam. So for me, this I don't know, it just really fascinated me that we could kind of identify where this phrase that we say 100 times a day actually is put together. And then, without going in detail, there's a lot of adjectives about God, but one of the phrases here has been adopted in the prayers of Shabbat. At the end of Psuki de Zimra, the first part of the Shabbat davening, before we get to Baruch Hu, so we have in 2 different verses, we have Ram V'Nisa, and we have Shochen Ad. And it's taken right from here. This is like the oldest version of where we would get those words. So for me also, I always get very excited when I've learned something, but I don't exactly know what the source is. And when I find out what the source is, it's like, for me personally, it's just always very exciting. And so here you see, we say it every Shabbos, Shochein ad marom b'kadosh shemo. And if you listen again, here it says, Shochein ad v'kadosh shemo, marom v'kadosh. The very words that are adapted for the Shabbat davening. So I found that just very fascinating, and we'll end with one of the most important parts of this whole thing is where it says, after all these names of God, and we'll call it attributes of God, it says, Ubara et olamo, and he created his world through 3 books. Through Sefer, that's how we call a book today, Sefer. But here it means text. Bisfar, means number. A mispar is a number. And the sipur. So Rabbi Kaplan, and by the way, if anyone is interested, this is the book I'm using. It's Sefer Yetzirah from Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. Classic explanation in English of the Sefer Yetzirah. Really, without this, it would be very, very hard to understand the Sefer Yetzirah. For English speakers, there are many commentaries in Hebrew, but in English, this is it. Again, so if people call it Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation, literally it's the book of formation. But since it's about creation, and it's by Aryeh Kaplan, I'm sure you can get it on Amazon. Anyone could get it on Amazon. So he translates the last word of sipur as communication. I did it as sipur, a story, for the following reason, is that many of you know that, give me a second. Oh. So I don't have the cover on here so you can see it, but this is the very, very well-known book from Rav Ginsburg called The Hebrew Letters, Channels of Creative Consciousness. It's been reprinted many times. And it was my great honor, you'll see here, that it was assisted by yours truly. And the book is based on every letter having a form, a name, and a number. And it's taken from right here because the form is the sefer, is the text. Each letter has a form. It's a pictorial language. Many people are not aware of that, but the forms of the letters are significant. And then, as we know, every letter has a number. That's the second book mentioned here. And the third is every letter has a name. Many people are not aware that the names of the letters are extremely important. The word Aleph means something. It's not just a word that's chosen to represent the form of the letter Aleph. Aleph means something. Beit means something. Gimel, Dalet, each letter. And so it tells the story of the letter. And so Rav Ginsburg's whole understanding of the letters is based right here from Sefer Yetzirah. Because with the form, the name, and the number of the letters is how God creates the world. These are the building blocks of creation. So this is where we're going to stop tonight. We're going to pick up next week with what I'm calling an overview of Sefer Yetzirah. And I'm quite excited about it because it's going to make me like really get into Sefer Yetzirah. I've gone through it many times, but each time you go through it, like any book, especially the Torah, the more times you go through it, the more meaningful it becomes. So just to end on the note of the the practicalities is the more we understand about the building blocks of creation, the more we understand when we learn the Torah. Because, as I mentioned, all of the meanings of the Torah, from the simple to the mystical, are connected to the letters and the meaning of the words that the letters make up. And so the more we understand about the letters, and of course the Sfirot, we're not going to, we did a whole series on the Sfirot. People are welcome to pick up on that. But as I said, the first 2 chapters of Sefer Yetzirah are about the Sfirot. This is the oldest revelation of these 32 wondrous pathways of wisdom. And so in a practical level, we could be learning Torah and, let's say, praying by rote. Or we could be praying and learning with tremendous insight and excitement and inspiration and joy. And so, going back to how we began this class, that is the reason that we're learning the wonders of creation, so that it will hook us into the Torah. It will hook us into being excited about our service of God. Nothing could be more practical than that. If we're going to make 100 blessings a day, so it could be dry or it could be deep. Let's choose deep, and I bless us all. It should be the deepest of the deep. And good. So you